A very good evening to all of you. It is my pleasure and privilege as the president of the Ceylon College of Physicians to welcome all of you this evening. Today we are going to have the first in our Beyond Medicine series of lectures for 2022. Now, Beyond Medicine is a special feature that we've started this year in the CCP. This has been there in the CCP in the past, but we are reviving it this year. Because as I described during the induction ceremony in my speech, we wish to improve the critical thinking and communication skills and resilience of doctors in addition to promoting technical excellence. So it is with that in mind that we want to organize this program so that we can broaden our horizons, broaden our scopes, and become more aware of the history and the traditions and how we are here today, why we are here today, and how and why we got here today. So with that in mind, we have the first lecture, and I will formally introduce the speaker later. We have Dr. Chandima Amarasena, who is going to speak to us on mythology in medicine. Now, among our guests, we have the council members and the past presidents here, and then of course we have a large online audience. The last time I checked, we had about 350 people who had registered for this talk to watch us online. So I welcome all of them as well. And a very special warm welcome to Dr. Asif Naqvi and Ban Al-Safar, Dr. Ban Al-Safar, who are here as the MRCP PACERS examiners, as the chief examiners of the MRCP PACERS. So that's very nice that they've accepted our invitation and joined us. So we have representation actually from the Royal Colleges of Physicians from UK as well for this talk. Before I introduce the speaker, I wish to acknowledge the support I've received, the council has received from a few people. Dr. Niyomali Amarasena, who coordinated this event and did so much in the background to get things going. Our sponsors from Chemisphere, Mr. Aslam Dean, I'm very grateful to you, to Chemisphere, for supporting us in this endeavor. Danuka and Ashan, who made the beautiful video clip you would have seen as our promotional material, as well as the poster. Nalina from Impress Events, who is going to do the webcasting of today's program. Tariq from the hotel, who helped us coordinate all this. And then, before I introduce the speaker, just to draw your attention to one other special thing that will be starting for the CCP. We will have our first Pearls of Clinical Wisdom lecture happening on the 2nd of March, where we are inviting very senior colleagues with wide experience in the practice of medicine to give a talk to guide the junior doctors or the junior consultants in some other not so frequently touched area. So we will have Professor Saman Gunatilaka speaking to us, past president of the CCP, speaking to us on the 2nd of March in this Pearls of Clinical Wisdom series. He will be speaking about predatory journals, fake publications, and how to, avoid all that, and how to sift our way through what is valid. So I welcome all of you to register for that as well, the online audience as well. So that's another invitation. So in terms of today's talk, we have a speaker, Dr. Chandima Amarasena, who is probably known better in Sri Lanka than I am. So it is not easy for me to introduce Dr. Amarasena. Gallage Aruna Chandima Amarasena obtained his medical degree, MBBS, in 1985 from the Faculty of Medicine, University of Colombo, with first-class honors and gold medals in surgery and operative surgery. Obtained Master of Surgery postgraduate degree from the PGIM. In 1990, awarded gold medal for the best performance in both the MS Part 1 and the Part 2. Having selected cardiac surgery as his specialty, did his training at the National Hospital and the Radcliffe Hospital, John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. Obtained fellowships of Royal College of Surgeons of London and Edinburgh. And on his return in 1995, he was appointed to the National Hospital of Sri Lanka as the cardiothoracic surgeon, and he's now the senior cardiothoracic surgeon there. He introduced starting coronary artery bypass program in state sector in the National Hospital, has an interest in mitral and tricuspid valve repair surgery, has many publications in local and international journals, is a teacher of undergraduate medical students from Colombo and Kelaniya medical faculties, as well as postgraduate trainees in cardiac surgery. And Dr. Amarasena's extracurricular activities include art, archaeology, and wildlife. And I particularly remember 3 years back when I was the president of the Gaul Medical Association, I invited Dr. Amarasena to speak to the Gaul Medical Association audience on Da Vinci and medicine. That was the first time that he did that talk, and it went viral, and I believe that he was invited by many forums, including the Sri Lanka Literary Society in the UK, to do the same talk. This is the first time that he's going to talk about mythology in medicine, and I'm certain that he will have to repeat this lecture many times, for he is an enthralling, an engaging, and a fascinating speaker to listen to. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to invite Dr. Chandima Amarasena to speak to you on mythology in medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Arosha. I almost didn't recognize myself in your description. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to you. But first, I must thank Professor Arosha Disanayake, President of the Ceylon College of Physicians, for inviting me to give this presentation. Now, the topic is mythology in medicine, a bit of an oxymoron, because mythology is superstition and medicine is a science. So, but we must realize that Western and allopathic medicine has origins from ancient Greece. In fact, the so-called father of modern medicine, Hippocrates, practiced and lived in ancient Greece from 460 BC to 370 BC. He's supposed to have lived for 110 years. Now, we also know that the ancient Greeks had a very good understanding of medicine and surgery, as depicted in this Greek red figure pottery. On the left-hand side, you see Achilles binding an arrow wound on the left elbow of his friend Patroclus. On the right-hand side is a scene of, bloodletting. Now, my talk will be in 3 parts. An introduction to the Greco-Roman gods. The second part on gods of medicine and medical symbolism. And the third part on medical eponyms of mythological origin. Now, the thing about Greco-Roman gods is that there were a lot of them. They were extremely promiscuous. They mated with parents, offspring, siblings, other gods, nymphs, and humans. They were extremely fecund as well, produced a lot of children. Zeus was supposed to have produced more than 90 children. There was a lot of incest. Sex crossed gender and species barriers. There were quarrels, murder, patricide, abductions, and rape. A lot like a soap opera. And they interacted with humans in creative, manipulative, and often violent ways. Now, you must remember these stories are over 3,000 years old and were initially spread by oral tradition. So there are many variations to the stories. Now, the extent of the pantheon is so vast, you can see it in the ceiling fresco in a building called Sala del Gigante in Mantua. A close-up shows Jupiter in his throne in the middle, surrounded by many major and minor gods and goddesses. Now, such a vast pantheon is initially rather confusing, but it's easy to understand them if you realize that there are actually 3 generations existing side by side. The first generation, the primordial gods, here, the protogenoi. Then the second generation, the titans. and the third generation, the Olympians. Now, if you look at the world according to the ancient Greeks, initially, at the beginning, there's chaos or nothingness. Out of this was spontaneously born Gaia, Mother Earth, and other protogenoi such as Tartarus, Erebus, Nyx, and Oceanus. Gaia spontaneously gives birth to a male child, Uranus, god of the sky. Gaia and Uranus mate, mother and son, and produce the Titans, the second generation of the gods. They also produce some unique monsters, Cyclopes, giants with only one eye, and Hecatoncheires, monsters with 50 heads and 100 arms. Now, Uranus was a bad father and ill-treated his children, particularly the monsters, whom he banished to Tartarus, the lowest part of Hades, the underworld. Now, obviously, divorce was not an option in ancient Greek mythology. So Gaia, his wife, got Cronus, her son, to castrate his father Uranus, as depicted in this fresco by Giorgio Vasari. Now, after Uranus was deposed, the second generation of gods, the Titans, ruled the world. Now, Cronus mated with his sister Rhea, carrying on the proud tradition of incest. Now, Cronus is fearful what goes around comes around, and is worried that his children will overthrow them, and he comes up with a unique solution. He follows his children, at least the first 5, when they are born. Rhea, his sister wife, manages to save the last one, Zeus, by giving him a stone wrapped in swaddling cloth, as depicted by this bas relief statue from the Capitoline Museum. Zeus grows up in the island of Crete and manages to depose Cronus and gets him to vomit his siblings, who are still alive because gods, being immortal, are not affected by gastric acid. Now, there are 2 generations of gods, the Olympians and the Titans, and they battle it out for supremacy. This is called Titanomachy. Olympians win, and they rule the world. And Zeus, carrying on the family tradition of incest, mates with his sister Hera. There are 12 main Olympians, the first 6 and their major siblings, and this image is from the DC Comics showing the Olympians. Now, the Greeks were famous travelers and colonizers. They colonized the entire Mediterranean coast, the Aegean coast, and the Black Sea. And naturally, they took their gods and goddesses with them and built temples. When the Romans conquered Greeks, they immediately adopted the Greek gods and goddesses as their own. And at the height of the Roman Empire, this pantheon of polytheistic religion spread as far north as Britannia, as far west as Lusitania and Hispania, as far east as Mesopotamia, and as far south as Egypt. They, of course, changed the names of the gods. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera became Juno, Aphrodite became Venus, Athena became Minerva, etc. Now, since sex makes everything interesting, some sexual peccadillos of the gods. Now here you see this is Jupiter and Juno, brother and sister, as painted by Charles Antoine Coppel. And on the right-hand side is a fresco from Pompeii, Aphrodite and Ares. Depending on which myth of origin of Aphrodite you believe in, this is a liaison between aunt and nephew or brother and sister. Homosexuality was very common in Greece. Here is Apollo and Hyacinth, and here is Zeus and Ganymede. Ganymede was the cupbearer of the gods, and if you look at this painting, it's a lot like pedophilia. Sex, as I said, crossed gender barriers. This is this famous statue from the Naples Museum, Pan having sex with a goat, and if you look closely, the goat seems to be rather enjoying the experience. This is the myth of Pasiphae and the Cretan bull. Pasiphae was the queen of Crete, who had an affair with the Cretan bull, and this union gave birth to the Minotaur, a monster with a bull's head and a human body, who was ultimately killed in the labyrinth by Theseus, the king of Athens. There were a lot of abductions, seductions, and rape. Here is the rape of Europa, a Phoenician princess called Europa being abducted by Zeus in the guise of a bull. Europa went on to give her name to the entire continent of Europe. This is the seduction of Danae in the form of a golden shower by Zeus. No, not that golden shower that some of you all are thinking of. This union gave rise to the hero Perseus. So just to show how much the ancient Greeks influenced us, take the term academia and academics. And we owe this to no other than Helen of Troy. Her mother, Leda, was a beautiful princess who was married to Tyndareus, the prince of Sparta. Zeus, the eternal philanderer, had his eyes on Leda, and one night visited her in the guise of a swan and seduced her. So that's why in all these paintings, the swan is strategically placed between Leda's legs. Leda becomes pregnant and gives birth, no surprise because of swan is involved, to 2 eggs. From one egg, the 2 male twins, Castor and Pollux, and from the other egg, Helen and Clytemnestra. Helen was a noted beauty. She was kidnapped twice. The second time led to the Trojan War. However, when she was 12 years, she was kidnapped by Theseus, the king of Athens, the guy who killed the Minotaur. The Spartans naturally went to war to recover their princess, and a Greek youth named Academus told them where to find her. After the rescue, the grateful Spartans gifted Academus a grove of olives in Athens, and this was called the Grove of Academus. Many centuries later, Plato the philosopher started a school of philosophy in 4th century BC and taught his students in this grove as they walked through the olive trees. So groves of Academus became groves of academia. So the term academy is used for any institute of higher learning. And we who are graduates of that kind of institutions are academics. Now this is one of the more famous depictions of Plato's School of Philosophy, the School of Athens by Raphael in the Vatican Museum. Take the term symposia. We all have symposia in all our medical conferences. However, symposia were actually all-male drinking parties in ancient Greece. Rich Greek men would invite their male friends and have a good time. So a lot of wine and good food was consumed. However, no respectable females, including wives, were included, but females were invited. Dancing girls, flute players, and high-class courtesans called heterae. So these naturally degenerated into drunken orgies. Here is Anselm Feuerbach's depiction of such a symposium. Note particularly the scantily clad dancing girls. Plato, not all symposia involve debauchery. Plato was in favor of orderly, serious symposia where important things like philosophy, politics, art, music was discussed. In one of his dialogues, Protagoras, he says, when men of education gather to drink, you will not see any flautists or dancing girls. And even if they drink a lot, they are capable of talking and listening in an orderly fashion. So from that we can gather, while Plato may have been a great philosopher, but he was something of a killjoy. Can you imagine how much more interesting our symposia would be if he had semi-nude dancing girls? So the second segment of my presentation is Gods of Medicine and Medical Symbolism. Now in the original Hippocratic Oath, it says, I swear by Apollo physician, by Asclepius, by Hygeia, by Panacea, and by all the gods and goddesses, making them my witness that I will carry out according to my ability and judgment this oath and this indenture. So here is a list of gods and demigods associated with medicine. The first, Apollo, the son of Zeus and Leto, twin of Artemis. He was the patron deity of Delphi. He was the god of medicine and healing and could ward off evils and epidemics. However, if he was annoyed with you, he could cause an epidemic. He was also the god of archery, prophecy, knowledge, music, song, dance, and poetry. He was the protector of the young, shepherds, sailors, foreigners, and refugees. So he had a varied portfolio, a little like Sri Lankan politicians who are ministers. Now, this statue is the Belvedere Apollo at the Vatican Museum. Now, Apollo had an affair with a mortal princess called Coronis from Larissa in Greece. Now, Coronis also had an affair with another man called Ischys. An angry Apollo killed Coronis and immediately regretted this, as shown in this painting, and burned the body at a pyre. But suddenly realizing that Coronis was actually pregnant with his son, he rescued the unborn child by cutting open the wound. So the world's first cesarean section, at least in mythology, was by Apollo. The child was Asclepion. Now, Apollo, being a busy god with a wide portfolio, had no time to look after little children. So he gave it to the second entity we are concerned about today, Chiron, to look after the child. The Chiron was a centaur, half human, half horse, as seen from this Greek black figure pottery vase. Sorry. They lived in Thessaly in Mount Pelion. Now, most centaurs were wild, lawless, violent, and lustful. The exception was Chiron, who was wise, just, well versed in medicine, music, prophecy, and justice. So basically, the white sheep in the family of centaurs. He was a teacher not only to Asclepius, but to many other Greek heroes, Jason of the Argonauts, Hercules, and Achilles. Now, one of the best depictions of Chiron is given by Pierce Brosnan in the movie Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Now, Chiron is such an important figure in medicine that the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh have adopted Chiron as their symbol. Asclepius, the god of medicine, spelled differently by the Greeks and the Latins, was taught medicine by Chiron. He was a successful physician. As an aside from this, the term physician and doctor were not used in ancient Greece. The term was iatros, meaning healer. And from iatros, we get the name iatrogenic, which means physician-induced disease. Now, his practice was in Thessaly, but he was such a successful physician that a cult of Asclepius developed around him. And this was practiced in an institution called Asclepion. This cult spread everywhere to rest of Greece. And at the height of the Roman Empire, there were more than 400 such Asclepia. The three most famous ones were at Epidaurus, at Kos, and at Pergamum. He was supposedly such a successful physician that he stopped people from dying. And he could, in fact, resurrect people from death using Medusa's blood. Now, this was, of course, going too far, encroaching on the powers of the gods. So an angry Zeus killed him with a lightning bolt. Of course, gods immediately regret their rash actions, a lot like Sri Lankans. And he was resurrected in the heavens as the constellation Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus means the serpent holder. Now, Asclepius married a lady called Epione and had, depending on which story you believe in, 7 to 8 children. The men were unfortunately mortal, but the daughters were immortal. Machaon and Podalirius, the sons, actually, according to the Iliad, fought in the Trojan War. And they treated many Greeks, including 2 of the heroes, Philoctetes and Menelaus. Philoctetes was the hero who inherited Hercules' bow and arrow. He had a non-healing, offensive-smelling ulcer in the leg due to a snake bite, which Machaon treated. Following this treatment, he successfully went on to use his bow and arrow to kill Paris, the guy who abducted Helen. Menelaus, the husband of Helen, had an arrow wound through his flanks, and this was successfully pulled out by Machaon. All 5 of his daughters were involved with medicine. But we are concerned only with 2 of them at the moment. Hygeia, goddess of health, cleanliness, and sanitation, who gives us actually the term hygiene. And Panacea, goddess of cures and panaceas, who gives us the term panacea. So, an Asclepion is where the cult of Asclepius was practiced. This was the equivalent of a modern health resort or a hospital. It was located in where fresh air was abundant and the surroundings were healthful, and usually located at a site of a sacred spring. It was not just one building, but a complex of buildings. There was a temple to god Asclepius, a dormitory where inward patients slept, a bathhouse because cleanliness was important for health, a gymnasium and stadium because exercise was good for your health, and a theater because art and music was good for your mental well-being, and a building called Tholos, a circular building, the purpose of which we still don't know. The patients were managed by trained priests who were also trained in the arts of healing. The treatment was in 2 stages. Catharsis or purification. Patients were admitted, underwent purification with baths, exercise, healthy diet, including emetics and purgatives. Then came the most important part, enkoimesis or dream therapy. The patients were given a narcotic drug, probably extract of the opium poppy, and these patients went into a narcotic-induced sleep. They dreamt that god Asclepius or his priest visited them and discussed their illness. The next morning, they discussed this dream with the priest of Asclepius and were told how to get rid of their illnesses. So praying was a part of the cure, and medicine was more religious and psychological in nature than based on science. So here is a painting depicting the priests of Asclepius visiting the sleeping patients in the dormitory, a lot like the night rounds that we used to do. Now, of the three famous Asclepia, here is an artist's impression of the Asclepian at Epidaurus. In the center is the temple to Asclepius. This is the dormitory, the bathhouse, the gymnasium, and the stadium, and this is the Tholos. And here is a modern day aerial view of the archaeological at Epidaurus. Here is the theater, and here is the foundation of the Tholos. And here is a stone votive inscription showing Asclepius or one of his priests treating a woman. Now, patients who came to this kind of Asclepia brought an offering to appease the gods. Now, here is a stone tablet with an inscription to Apollo, pleading for cure. And here are clay body parts. A patient brought a body part of which was afflicted with a disease. So if you have a headache, you brought a head. If you had an earache, you brought an ear. If you had a breast pain, you brought a breast. But it is obvious that certain amount of serious medicine did take place in this Asclepia. These are the collection of surgical tools from the archaeological site at Epidaurus. You can clearly identify forceps, knives, probes, and scissors, as well as containers for medicine. The snake was very important to ancient Greek medicine because the snake periodically shed its skin. This was taken as a sign of rejuvenation and healing. So there were a lot of snakes in these Asclepia crawling around where the patients were. The snake was a non-venomous snake called the Elaphe longissimus. So the snake has become an important symbol of medicine. And you can see here, the staff of Asclepius has a snake wrapped around it. Incidentally, the Greek term for a staff is bacterios, from which we get the term bacteria. The term coccus also comes from Greek, kokos, which means the berry. This is Hygeia feeding the snake milk from a saucer, and this Hygeia feeding a snake milk is a well-recognized symbol of pharmacies in Europe. This is here is the crest of the Royal College of Surgeons of England. Note these two men holding the escutcheon of the College of Surgeons. This is Machaon holding the arrow that he withdrew from the flank of Menelaus. And this is Podalerius with the staff of Asclepius. This is the crest of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. And here is, Asclepius. Now, a lot of you guys will recognize this. This is the Queen Street entrance of the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh. Note the three statues. At the top, Hygeia with the snake and the bowl, Asclepius, and a very thoughtful-looking Hippocrates. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, practiced at the second Asclepian that I'm going to talk about, the Asclepian of Kos. Kos is an island off the coast of Turkey, part of the Dodecanese Islands, and this is an artist's impression of the Asclepian of Kos. And here is how it looks like today. The third well-known Asclepian is at Pergamum in Turkey, where Galen practiced. And here is an artist's model of that Asclepian. And here are three images of how it looks like today. So, if one snake is good for medicine, are two snakes better? There is confusion among some people as to which of these two symbols is the symbol of medicine. The staff of Asclepius I have already told you about. This is the caduceus, a bronze rod with two wings and two snakes. This is actually the symbol of Hermes or Mercury, the messenger of the gods, the patron of commerce and trading, and the patron of thieves. Hardly a guy whose symbol that we should adopt as our symbol. there's a lot of confusion between which of these two symbols is the symbol of medicine. And this confusion is most in USA, who use the caduceus as a medical symbol. There are many reasons for this. Now, unfortunately, time does not permit me to go into this. You can note that many organizations, international and national, use the staff of Asclepius as their symbol, including the World Health Organization, your own Ceylon College of Physicians, my Ceylon College of Surgeons of Sri Lanka, and the Sri Lanka Medical Associations. Americans always like to do things differently, including driving on the wrong side of the road. You can see the symbol of the US Army Medical Corps is the caduceus. So is the symbol of the US Public Health Corps. Interestingly, the Indian Association of Medicine and the All India Institute of Medicine use a modified caduceus. So the final segment of my talk, medical eponyms of mythological origin or mythonyms. Take Atlas. Atlas was a Titan who led the Titans in the war between the Titans and the Olympians. And when they lost, he was punished by Zeus to carry the weight of the heavens for all eternity. One of the best depictions is the Farnese Atlas at the Naples Museum. The first cervical vertebra carries the weight of the skull, so it is hence called the Atlas vertebra. Achilles, the hero of the poem Iliad, the greatest of all Greek warriors, was the son of Nereid Thetis and King Peleus. When he was born, there was a prophecy that he would be a great warrior, but die young. His worried mother tried to make him invulnerable by dipping him in river Styx at the entrance to Hades. However, she held on to him by the heel. The water did not come into contact with that. So there was a point of weakness. In fact, Achilles was killed in the Trojan War by a poisoned arrow through the heel shot by Paris. The famous painter Peter Paul Rubens did a series of paintings, The Life of Achilles. Here is Thetis dipping baby Achilles headfirst into river Styx. And this is the death of Achilles. If you note carefully, you can see the arrow through his heel. So the largest tendon in the human body is the tendocalcaneus, which connects the gracilis muscle and the soleus muscle with the calcaneum. So in honor of Achilles, we call it the Achilles tendon. You can get Achilles tendinitis, Achilles bursitis, and rupture of the Achilles tendon. Hymenaeus was a minor god in the Greek pantheon, the god of weddings and wedding hymns, depicted as a youth with wings carrying two torches. Hymns to him were sung at all ancient Greek weddings. So he gives us the word hymen, a sign of virginity. Now, my favorite goddess of all, Aphrodite or Venus, the goddess of love, beauty, eternal youth, and sex, but also the goddess of patron goddess of prostitutes. There are two origins to her story. One was of the Sea of Cyprus, from the genitals of Uranus when he was castrated. The second origin was as a daughter of Zeus and Dione. She was married to the only ugly god in the pantheon, Hephaestus of Vulcan, and she contributed to start the Trojan War. This is the Aphrodite of Cnidus, one of the earliest depictions of the female nude form. But a better depiction is this. Sandro Botticelli's famous painting, The Birth of Venus, at the Uffizi Gallery. If you look at it, here is Venus being wafted ashore on a seashell, modestly covering her breast and pudendum with her hands, and she's being blown ashore by these two figures, Zephyr the west wind and Aura, a minor god of the wind. You can see the breath here. And from the right, rushes in Chloris, carrying a robe to cover her nudity. Just to see how well Botticelli has done this painting, take a look at this close-up and see how well he has got the skin tones. The second famous depiction is, of course, Aphrodite of Miletus or Venus de Milo at the Louvre. Aphrodite was married to Hephaestus, but she was very promiscuous and she had many affairs with gods, demigods, and mortals. Now, this liaison with Anchises, a prince of Greece, led to the birth of a boy called Aeneas, a prince of Troy. And according to Virgil's Aeneid, he was the founder of the Roman race. Now, so looking at all these people, and this is a smaller list, Aphrodite is what we might call a hot, fast number. Now, what does she give us? The Mons Veneris, the prominence just about the pudendum of a female. But she also gives us venereal disease, diseases spread by sexual intercourse, more politically correctly now called sexually transmitted disease, and the specialty which treats them, venereology. Under her Greek name, she gives us aphrodisiacs, any food or drug which increases sexual desire. Mercury, at least the element mercury, was named after the god Mercury. It was one of the earliest treatments of syphilis. It was consumed orally as an elixir, applied as an ointment, inhaled as fumes, and given rectally as an enema. Treatment continued for years of her life and was extremely toxic. Hence the term, one evening with Venus and a lifetime with Mercury. Two woodcuts of treatment. Here a patient is being given an elixir of mercury, and here is a unique cabinet where you are fumigated with mercury fumes. Her children also gave names to various medical conditions. Hermaphroditus was the son of Aphrodite and Hermes. He was an extremely handsome youth, and a nymph named Salamakis fell in love with him but was rejected. So she prayed to the gods to unite them. She wanted them united as god and goddess, but the capricious gods merged their bodies to form a unique individual, as seen in these two figures, individual with both male and female genitalia. This is a fresco from Pompeii, this statue in the Capitoline Museum. And here's another one at the National Museum of Rome, the sleeping Hermaphroditus. Now, hermaphroditism, or an organism with both male and female genitalia, are very common in plants and invertebrates, but very rare in humans. It's considered an outdated concept in medicine now, but until mid-20th century, sex was categorized as 5 types: male, female, male pseudohermaphrodite, female pseudohermaphrodite, and a true hermaphrodite. A true hermaphrodite had gonadal tissues from both the male and the female, both the ovary and the testes. The external genitalia could be male, female, or ambiguous. A pseudohermaphrodite, on the other hand, had either ovaries or testes, only from one sex. But the external genitalia could be of the opposite sex or ambiguous. Now, this term is considered pejorative, and at a major conference in 2005 held in Chicago, it was decided to reclassify all these conditions as disorders of sex development, defined as congenital conditions in which development of chromosomal, gonadal, and anatomic sex is atypical. Cupid, or Eros, was the god of love and lust. From him we get the terms erotic and erotogenous zones. There is this condition called erotomania, which is a psychiatric condition, also called the Clermont syndrome. There's a delusional belief, more common in young women, but affects men also, where one falsely believes that he or she is loved by another person, usually of a higher social or professional status. This is what lay people call stalking. The term Cupid's bow is usually given to the upper border of a girl's lips, but it is also a radiological sign, as you can see, to identify the lower plate of the lumbar vertebrae. The god Priapus was the son of Aphrodite and Dionysus. When he was a baby, Hera cursed him and made him ugly with a large penis. He was the god of reproductive power and fertility, later the god of lasciviousness and obscenity. Here are 2 famous depictions of this god. This is in Pompeii, in the house of the brothers Vettae, in the vestibule. You get Priapus weighing his enormous member against a bag of gold. This is the Priapus of Ephesus, which is in the Ephesus Museum. Now, the cult of Priapus was very popular in Pompeii. These are oil lamps designed to look like Priapus. So what does Priapus do for medicine? There is this condition called priapism, a prolonged, persistent erection in the absence of appropriate stimulus lasting more than 4 hours. There are 3 broad etiologies: ischemic, non-ischemic, recurrent ischemic. Now, this is a real emergency, as the men in the audience will appreciate, because any delay in the treatment for more than 6 hours means corporal tissue necrosis and fibrosis, resulting in erectile dysfunction and impotence. You might recall a senior politician who got this condition while with his mistress and was quickly rushed to a leading private hospital. The treatment is by cavernous blood gas analysis and penile ultrasound. The treatment is rather painful. Aspiration, intracorporeal injection of diluted phenylephrine, and a surgical shunt procedure from corpus cavernosum to corpus spongiosum. In late presentation for erectile dysfunction, implantation of a penile prosthesis. The other goddess now we are concerned about is Athena or Minerva. She was the goddess of wisdom, handicraft, and war. She was the daughter of Zeus and Metis. Now, Zeus was told, just like before, that his children might overthrow him. So, Zeus took a unique solution and followed the pregnant Metis whole, and subsequently developed a terrible headache. Obviously, paracetamol was not available in those days, so he appealed to the fellow god Hephaestus, who took a unique treatment and cleaved Zeus's head open with an axe. And promptly Athena sprang out with a war cry, fully armored. She was, unlike Aphrodite, a virgin goddess. She was the patron of Athens, and she's always depicted clad in a suit of armor. So in certain unstable fractures of the cervical spine, we use a large plaster cast or a brace. And in honor of Athena, we call this the Minerva jacket or brace. The myth of Arachne. Athena was also the goddess of art, craft, and weaving. Arachne was a mortal woman who was also an expert spinner and weaver. She boasted that she was better than Athena. Bad move, because angry Athena challenged her to a duel of weaving. And funnily enough, Arachne's cloth was much better. But an angry Athena turned Arachne into a spider. So all the spiders in the world are classified under genus Arachnida in honor of Arachne. Here are two images of the myth of Arachne, a woodcut from the medieval era, and the more famous painting by Diego Velázquez, Las Hilanderas, or the Spinners, which is in the Prado. So what does she do for medicine? Inside the skull, the human brain is covered by three membranes, the dura, the arachnoid, and the pia mater. The middle one resembles a spider web, and hence it's called the arachnoid mater. Some people have extremely long fingers similar to the legs of a spider, arachnodactyly. This is pathognomonic of Marfan syndrome or Marfan's habitus. Arachnophobia is an intense, irrational fear of spiders and other arachnids. I will talk more about phobias later. Monsters were gallow in Greek mythology. Medusa was one of the three Gorgon sisters, was a beautiful maiden but extremely vain. There are two stories as to how she became a monster. One says that she boasted that she was prettier than Athena and Athena cursed her. The second one was that she was a virgin priestess to goddess Athena and she was ravished by Poseidon. In a classic case of blame the woman, Athena cursed her. Her hair consisted of a nest of snakes, as seen in this Bernini bust of Medusa, and she turned any mortal who looked at her into stone. She was killed by the Greek hero Perseus. And one of the best depictions of this myth in classical art is Benvenuto Cellini's Cellini Medusa, which is in the Piazza Signoria in Florence, depicting Perseus holding up the decapitated head of Medusa. And if you look closely, you can see the snakes. But a more realistic, lifelike image is given by the Swedish actress Uma Thurman in the movie Percy Jackson and the Olympians. In extreme cases of cirrhosis, the pressure in the portal venous system is so high that collaterals form around the umbilicus between the portal and the systemic circulation, and this is called caput medusae or head of Medusa. As an aside from this, the term ascites comes from the Greek word askos, for a sack. In the poem Odyssey, Aeolus, god of the wind, gives Odysseus a oxide bag of wind to help them sail their way home. In ascites also, the abdomen swells like a filled bag, so ascites comes from askos. Chimera was a unique monster, three monster animals in one. There was this lion who breathed fire, and there was a head of a goat rising from his spine, and the tail was a snake. It terrorized the region of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, and was killed, as shown in this mosaic, by the Greek hero Bellerophon on the winged horse Pegasus. Now in medicine, a chimera or chimerism is a single organism who has genetic material from two or more individuals. It can be natural or iatrogenic. Iatrogenic is recipients of tissue or organ transplantation. The recipient has his own DNA, but the organ has DNA from the donor. The natural are three types: fusion or tetragametic chimeras, where in the case of twins, one dies in the blastocyst stage and is absorbed into the other twin. Twin or blood transfusion chimeras are dizygotic twins who share a common placenta, and exchange of DNA material occurs through the placenta. Microchimeras are where less than 10% of the DNA material of foreign type, and this occurs due to fetal-maternal cell transfer across the placenta. Now, this is American singer and dancer Tyler Moore. Note the large red birthmark. This is actually Tyler's dead twin sister, which she has absorbed into her body. However, there's a rather controversial type of chimerism, experimental chimerism, where scientists are trying to create human-animal chimeras. This is one of the latest publications in the journal Cell in April last year, where the scientists from Salk Institute USA and Kunming University China injected human pluripotent stem cells into monkey blastocysts and allowed the fetus to grow. Now, this kind of experimentation is done to provide organs for organ transplantation, but has raised a lot of ethical questions of should we be doing human-animal chimeric experiments. Cyclops, as I told you, were giant monsters with only one eye. The most famous of them was Polyphemus in the poem Odyssey, who was blinded by Odysseus. Now, in this rare congenital abnormality, there's failure of the embryonic prosencephalon to divide the orbit. So you get a fetus with only one eye. Now, psychiatry is a specialty which got its name entirely from a minor Greek goddess. The story is rather interesting. One of the few Greek mythological stories where there's a happy ending. Psyche was the third daughter of a king in Greece, and her beauty supposedly surpassed that of Aphrodite. This, of course, made Aphrodite jealous, so she sends her son Cupid to punish her. Now, Cupid falls in love with Psyche and carries her away to a palace in the sky and makes her his wife. Now, being a good son, he's scared of his mother and hides his identity from his mistress and visits her only in the dark. However, Psyche, like all women being curious, one day tries to see how her paramour looks like by lighting an oil lamp. A hot drop of oil falls on Cupid, who wakes up and, angry that Psyche has betrayed him, abandons her. A distraught Psyche hunts high and low for her husband and unknowingly asks Aphrodite for help. A big mistake, as you ladies in the audience know. Never ask your wicked mother-in-law for help. So Aphrodite sets a series of impossible tasks, all designed specifically to kill Psyche. However, she managed to succeed in all of them with the help of many animals. The last task was to get a jar of beauty oil from Persephone, the queen of Hades, and she successfully does that as well. However, like all women, very curious, and like Pandora, she opens this jar, which actually contains a poison, which puts her into a deep sleep like Sleeping Beauty. Now, Cupid still loves her. He appeals to Zeus and is allowed to bring her back to life with a kiss. She was later immortalized as the goddess of the soul. One of the greatest depictions of this myth is in the Louvre, Antonio Canova's famous painting, Cupid Kissing Psyche. It embodies all these things that we should take in a portrait. See the two wings of Cupid, his leg, and Psyche's body form a cross. And her encircling arms encircle their heads. So you are thinking, has he kissed her or has she not? It's difficult to show in this slide, but if you have seen this statue in the Louvre, you realize the upper part of the body is live. You can even see the indentations of Cupid's fingers on her right breast. The bottom part looks dead. So Psyche was the goddess of soul, gives her name to psychiatry and psychology. A lot of psychiatric conditions have their name from Greek mythology. Take Oedipus complex, first described by Sigmund Freud. This is a condition where a boy feels a desire for his mother and is jealous of his father. According to Freud, we all go through 5 stages of psychosexual development. In the third of phallic phase, this occurs, and most men outgrow this and identify themselves with the parent of the same sex. However, some people continue to have this condition. And one of the most famous ones in real life was the Emperor Nero and his mother, Agrippina the Younger. Now, in art and literature, Hamlet and, of course, Norman Bates in the movie Psycho are classic examples. So, who was Oedipus? Oedipus was actually a prince of a city-state called Thebes. When he was born, there was a prophecy that he would kill his father. So he was abandoned by his parents. However, he was adopted by another royal family in Corinth and grew to become an adult. He started traveling around Greece and ended up in Thebes. He solved the famous riddle of the Sphinx. Which animal walks first on 4 feet, then on 2 feet, then on 3 feet, and entered the city of Thebes, got into an argument with his father and killed him, and married his mother. Later, when this came out, Oedipus was horrified. He gouged out his eyes and lived a life of a beggar. His mother, Jocasta, committed suicide. The female counterpart of this is the Electra complex, described by Carl Gustav Jung, where a girl is attracted to her father and is jealous of her mother. This is much, much less common than Oedipus complex, and this is named after Electra, the daughter of King Agamemnon, who led the Greeks against the Trojans. While Agamemnon was away fighting the Greeks, his wife Clytemnestra, Helen's sister, took on a lover called Aegisthus. 10 years later, when Agamemnon returned, both of them killed Agamemnon. Electra loved her father so much, she and her brother killed their mother and her lover, and this is Leighton's portrait of Electra at the tomb of Agamemnon. Manias and phobias. The affair between Ares and Aphrodite gave rise to 2 minor gods, Deimos, god of terror and dread, and Phobos, god of fear, panic. They accompanied their father Ares into battle, driving his war chariot, spreading fear in their wake. Phobos is usually represented as a lion's head, as in this mosaic. From Phobos comes the term phobias, an illogical, irrational fear of a particular object, class of objects, or situation. Now, I've already spoken about arachnophobia. Claustrophobia is fear of closed spaces. Agoraphobia is fear of open spaces. Hydrophobia is an old layman's term for rabies, where there is fear of swallowing. Nymphomania is actually a non-medical condition we know now. It comes from nymphs, beautiful female nature spirits who are protectors of air, seas, springs, rivers, and mountains. In the 18th and 19th century, women with excessive sexual desire were labeled as having this condition, nymphomania, and they were treated initially with cold baths and medicine, but later with horrific treatments which included incarceration, hysterectomy, ovariotomy or oophorectomy, and clitoridectomy. Of course, thanks to the work of Alfred Kinsey and Masters and Johnson, we know now this is not a medical illness. It's just that some women have a greater libido than that. In fact, Alfred Kinsey rather pithily put it, a nymphomaniac is any woman who has more sex than you do. Satyriasis is the male counterpoint, excessive addiction to sex in men. Satyrs were half horse, half human beings and had excessive sex drive, always chasing after women, and is depicted as having an erect phallus which they clasp in both their hands. So I will quickly go through some other minor things. The legend of Echo and Narcissus. Echo was a beautiful nymph who was cursed by Hera for not telling tales on infidelities of Zeus. So the curse was that she could only repeat other people's words. She loved Narcissus, who rejected her, so she pined away and died, so only her voice was left. The term echolalia comes from her, automatic repetition of words, as well as echopraxia, involuntary mimicking of another movements. Both of these are a sign of autism. Narcissus, the cause of Echo's death, was an extremely vain, handsome youth who was in love with himself. He starved to death, admiring his image in water, and was turned into a flower called Narcissus by the gods. So the term narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder is a recognized psychiatric condition, and in this reference article that I give, is defined as persistent pattern of grandiosity, fantasies of unlimited power or importance, and the need for admiration or special treatment. This, ladies and gentlemen, I am sure you will agree, describes the average Sri Lankan politician. Here is this legend in art. John William Waterhouse's portrait of Eco admiring Narcissus, and Caravaggio's painting of Narcissus admiring himself in a pool of water and the Narcissus flower. The god Morpheus was the god of dreams. He could take any form, and he appears in dreams to us, and he's supposed to deliver in these dreams messages from the gods to us to communicate future events. He is always depicted as sleeping in a cave surrounded by opium poppy flowers. So the drug morphine, which was originally extracted from the opium poppy, gets its name from Morpheus. The three Morai, or the Fates, were three sisters who determined the duration of life of any mortal. Taking from right to left, Clotho the spinner spun the thread, Lachesis the allotter measured the thread, and Atropos, depicted as an old lady with scissors, cut the thread, whereupon the mortal died. The drug atropine gets its name from Atropos. Atropine is a very important drug used in the treatment of poisoning by organophosphates and nerve agents, also in the treatment of bradycardia, and by ophthalmologists to dilate the pupil. It was originally extracted from a plant called the deadly nightshade because atropine in excess is also bad for you. The botanical term for this is Atropa belladonna. Atropa from Atropos. Belladonna means beautiful maiden in Italian because of the practice of the Renaissance women to use atropine drops to dilate their pupil to look beautiful. Geras was a primordial god. He was the god of old age, always depicted as a shrunken, shriveled old man with a walking stick. He gives his name to gerontology or geriatrics, the study of part of medicine which studies diseases of the old age. Nyx was another primordial goddess. She was the goddess of the night. She gives us nyctalopia, inability to see in the dark due to vitamin A deficiency, and nyctophobia, fear of darkness. From nyx comes the old Latin term nox, meaning night. From noct comes nocturia, having to pass urine in the night, a cardinal symptom of prostate enlargement. The legend of Pan and Syrinx. Pan was a demigod, half goat, half man. He delighted in frightening people, so from his name comes panic or panic attacks. He lusted after this nymph called Syrinx, who of course wanted nothing to do with him, and appealed to the gods to save her, and whereupon they turned her into a bush of reeds. Now reeds have a hollow center. From that, the term syringe comes, which we use to give injections, as well as the neurological condition syringomyelia, where there is cystic dilatation of the central spinal canal. The god of sleep in Greek is Hypnos and in Latin Somnos. In his Greek name as Hypnos, he gives us the hypnotics, a class of drugs which makes us go to sleep, and hypnosis. Under his Latin name Somnus, he gives us insomnia, somnambulism, and somnolence. Proteus syndrome is an extremely rare congenital abnormality where there is tissue overgrowth of all the three tissue embryologic lineages, ectoderm, endoderm, and the mesoderm. However, the orthopedic manifestations dominate and is named after the ancient Greek god of the sea, Proteus, who could change his shape because of the protean shapes the body takes in Proteus syndrome. Ulysses syndrome, named after Odysseus or Ulysses from the epic poem Odyssey, king of Ithaca, the craftiest of all Greek leaders, and the man behind the idea of the wooden horse, which led to the Greek victory at the Trojan War. It took him 10 years to return to Ithaca because he antagonized Poseidon, god of the sea, who put many obstacles on his way. There are two Ulysses syndromes actually. One affects doctors. This is the tendency of doctors to excessively over-investigate patients because of one or two abnormal tests. This occurs particularly at medical and insurance checkups or when the patient is a colleague, a friend or a relative, and it now also occurs in the private sector due to automatic battery of investigations routinely ordered. The second Ulysses syndrome, it occurs in migrants. It's a migrant syndrome of chronic and multiple stress because migrants undergo a lot of stress, particularly illegal immigrants. They are separated from their family. There's racial discrimination. There are language issues. There's poor access to jobs, housing, and health issues. And if you all have seen CNN or BBC, they go through an extremely dangerous journey through seas, desert, undergoing assault, rape, etc. So this is a psychosomatic condition with depressive, anxious, dissociative, and somatoform symptoms. Now, all these stories I told you are from Greek and Roman mythology. Here is one from Norse mythology. Ondine was a water nymph. She fell in love with a mortal called Hans. Hans was unfaithful to her, so she cursed him and deprived him of his ability to breathe without his will. So Hans died due to forgetting to breathe. There's this condition, Ondine's curse, more correctly called the central hypoventilation syndrome, an extremely rare form of sleep apnea, where there's life-threatening respiratory arrest during sleep, usually congenital due to a mutation of the FOX2B gene, but can be acquired due to extreme forms of encephalitis. There's impaired generation of nervous stimuli of respiration. The management is by non-invasive positive pressure ventilation or invasive positive pressure ventilation with a tracheostomy or a Quiras ventilator. One of the longest survivors is this guy, Liam Derbyshire, who celebrated his 21st birthday last year. From Greek Egyptian mythology comes Ammon's horn or the hippocampus. The hippocampus is a small curved mass of neural tissue in the floor of the lateral ventricles. It's a part of the limbic system and is important in memory. Damage to this is supposed to cause Alzheimer's disease. The god Ammon has horns of a ram, and because of the curvature of this organelle, Greek doctors called it Ammon's horn. However, Renaissance anatomists renamed it, saying it looks like a seahorse. Hippus means horse. So, in conclusion, some references. The originals, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, Hesiod's Theogony, Ovid's Metamorphosis, and Virgil's Aeneid. But if you want a more contemporary and modern and an irreverent look at the mythology, Liv Albert's Greek mythology and Philip Matizak's The Greek and Roman Myths are very good. And for the child in you, Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson and the Olympian series is very entertaining. And in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for listening to my rather long and rambling lecture. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did preparing for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We started with very high expectations, and it exceeded beyond the very high expectations as well. And most importantly, I think you've given some food for thought for me and the council to consider the structure of the symposia for the academic sessions. I'll run it by the council about the semi-nude dancing girls. I'll run it by the council, sir. I'm sure there might be some members in the audience, both the physical audience as well as the virtual audience, who might want to interact with you on this presentation. It's open to you all to just express your thoughts and clarify any areas that you would like to. And the Secretary of the CCP, Dr. Dinesh Sudhasinghe, will look at the chats which are coming on the webinar and then direct any questions that might be there.
Hello, good evening. I would like to know what is the take-home message for the men in the audience here?
Well, we may live in the 21st century, but we can't escape the gods. Not only the Greek and Roman gods, Hindu gods, Chinese gods. You see, they are all around us. And most of the stories that we have grown up with come from them. If you are an English speaker or study Western medicine, of course, the Greek and the Roman gods are very important. I mean, I can give you some example. We all eat cereal. Cereal comes from Ceres, the Roman goddess of agriculture, Demeter in Greek. A lot of you ladies own scarves from Hermes. The Hermes fashion house is named after the messenger god. Pandora papers. Pandora was the first woman, the equivalent of Eve in Christian mythology. The hallmark of the fashion house Versace is Medusa. We all have some item produced by the company Nike, either sports shoes, jogging shorts, or t-shirts. Nike is the goddess of victory. In fact, all our planets except Earth are named after Greek or Roman gods. So you really can't escape them. And they are very entertaining stories. I mean, they make 50 Shades of Grey look more like a kindergarten book.
We don't have actually no virtual audience, no questions, but lots of wishes congratulating the very entertaining lecture and requesting the video, so which will be uploaded over the next couple of days to the YouTube channel of the Ceylon College of Physicians. So you will be able to listen to it again. I'm pretty sure like all of us will be listening to it again.
Thank you very much, Professor Asif Naqvi from UK. First of all, I would like to thank our president of the college for the invitation. And I certainly enjoyed your lecture. And obviously, you know, I'm a gastroenterologist and very much familiar with Medusa, you know, all the time, you know, each time. Very rarely we have seen those beautiful pictures of Medusa, but if we ask any gastro, you know, trainee, you know, what is the manifestation of portal hypertension, they will use the word Medusa. So very familiar, and so is the ascites. And you know, the relationship of Medusa, ascites, and liver disease, and alcohol. I think. And in that, you know, a lot of manifestation that you have mentioned about sex. So, you know, all these, you know, they go hand in hand. And it is great to see the kind of how the terminology has evolved. And we have, and some of them, and I think one of my colleagues sitting here is a geriatrician. And she said the first time she has known what is the origin of you know, the word geriatrics. So although some of the words were familiar to me, but I think we have learned a lot from that, and I think a massive amount of effort which has gone for you to get into this. So really this piece of information, I think, needs to be made public so that everybody understands that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm happy to answer any more questions. Shiranta, you want to ask some questions? Any other gods?
We have one question from our virtual audience. So the question is, sexual promiscuity was very common among Greek gods and goddesses. Is there anything we can infer from this about the attitude to sex in ancient Greece?
Well, promiscuity was common among the gods, but unfortunately not that common among the mortals, because you must remember it was a patriarchal society. So the men could go out and have sex in brothels and etc., but respectable women could not. So if you want to play the field, you should be born a god or a rich Greek man. If you are born a how shall I say, respectable Greek woman, you are married off at the age of 12. And all you have to do is to produce children, sew clothes, keep the house. So it was very much a man's world, both in ancient Greece and Rome. And in fact, up to the 19th century, as you can see from these terrible images, there's another pseudo-medical condition called hysteria, of which I'm writing another set of slides, where basically a patriarchal society looked down on its women as a method of controlling them.
We have another comment. Charles Pereira, very interesting lecture. You have focused on historical and artistic aspect of medicine in addition to scientific aspect. Really enjoy the entire lecture.
Thank you.
So many comments like that, by the way.
So no more questions. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yes.
Shaminder, I told you that I came particularly for your lecture.
Thank you.
But what I expected was the spectrum of mythology in medicine. Spectrum refers to normally violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, what we call Vibgya. But I think you went beyond ultraviolet and infrared.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we have two more questions from a virtual audience. Sir, in your presentation, there were surgical instruments found from ancient Rome civilization. Are they older than Mihintale Ancient Hospital?
Yes, these are from Greek medical history, goes back as far as 600 BC. The Mihintale, these things go back, I think, in 3rd or 4th AD. Yes, we have to be proud of our heritage. Some people consider the hospitals at Mihintale and Anuradhapura and Polonnaruwa the earliest hospitals. But if you look at the Asclepia of Epidaurus and Kos, there was something resembling hospitals there as well. They use Greek mythology, we use Buddhist religion for medicine. So theirs is much older than ours.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And just an observation, sir. In the Asclepias, it appears that they've gone beyond medicine there as well.
Yes.
Having the lecture the theaters and the gymnasia.
Yes.
So they've even from that time,
Yes.
they've realized that practice of medicine is a lot of practice of medicine is beyond medicine.
Because that, I'm sure many of you would have visited the Asclepian at Epidaurus. I've been twice. The theatre is still in use for operatic performance, and people like Maria Callas have also performed. If you go to the last row, you can hear a whisper said at the stage. The acoustics are so wonderful. I mean, can you believe virtually before Christ, several centuries before Christ, people got their acoustics perfect.
And one more question. What about Indian and Eastern gods?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. I was waiting for that. Now, as a practitioner of allopathic or Western medicine, I concentrated on the gods which affected my specialty. But while in Ayurveda and Vedic medicines, we do pray to Hindu goddesses for cures, there is no medical affiliation. There is God Dhanavantari, who is the Hindu god of medicine. But the more famous personalities associated with medicine are people like Susruta, who are mortals. And in Susruta Samhita, we know he's considered the father of plastic surgery. But he was not a god. And there's a treatise called the Yellow Emperor's Canon of Medicine. The Yellow Emperor is the Chinese equivalent of Ravana. He's a mythological emperor whom the Chinese say discovered anything and everything, including tea, fireworks, calligraphy, everything. But we are not sure whether he exists. So he is supposed to, in fact, according to the Yellow Emperor's Canon, describe that blood circulates well before William Harvey. But they cannot be proven. So even in Hindu mythology, the gods are not directly involved with Ayurveda as the Greek and Roman gods are with Western medicine.
Another question. A wide spectrum in sexual differentiation is recognized in ancient art. What was the attitude of society towards people who did not readily fall within the male or female dichotomy?
Well, the thing is, ancient Greeks were much more, in some ways, advanced than us. They accepted homosexuality, if that is a question that this gentleman or lady was asking. Homosexuality was fairly common in ancient Greece. In fact, in the city-state of Sparta, pederasty, a love between an older man and a young boy, was encouraged. This was taken as a kind of a tutelage because Spartans were great warriors, and in pederasty, an older warrior would take a young boy under his wing. Sex was also involved, but also teach him the martial arts. So in Greeks, at least among the men, homosexuality was not a thing that the Victorians looked at it. In Romans, of course, it was less so, because if you look at the lives of the emperors by Plutarch and all that, I think all these emperors were basically bisexual. They had sex with men, women, boys, girls, you name it. So, whether you can call it a open-mindedness, having sex with a young boy or girl, in modern day social norms, in ancient Greek and Rome, any girl who attained menarche at the age of 12 was considered an adult and was married off. So that was the cultural norms those days. But whether they are acceptable nowadays is not, it's probably not acceptable.
I just want to make a comment. It's a good job that those all these gods were not born now, but they would have behind the jail now.
Yes. Well, since they are immortal, they are probably around, at least in ancient Greece. Yes. They would probably be sued in a court of law. But they probably would escape with their superpowers as well.
A question. Mostly the presentation was based on how medical terminology evolved from the gods' names, and they're asking, but what's the scientific basis of God?
That is not a question that you should address to me, but to your priest. Well, I think if you look at the history of theology, it is human nature to look up to somebody more powerful and more greater than you, to appeal for help and to palm off your problems. From ancient times, well before in the prehistoric times, people worshipped deities in trees, rivers, oceans, and lakes. This progressed on to the Greek and the Roman pantheon, and even before that, among the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians. You see, the thing about Greco-Roman gods is they are basically human. They are like us. They fight with each other. They chase after women. They chase after men also. They keep grudges. So the nice thing about the Greco-Roman pantheon is you can relate to them. Unlike, say, the Christian God or the Islamic God, where it's an all-powerful being who tells us what to do. It's the same in Egyptian mythology. So as to what is a god or its origin, I'm afraid I'm not qualified to answer that.
A question related to Eyes of Horus was asked twice. So please elaborate on the Eyes of Horus. How did it come to existence? Does it stand for prescription or treatment?
Well, the Eye of Horus looks a little like the RX that we doctors use, but it never was the forerunner of the sign of a prescription. The Eye of Horus was the all-seeing eye of god Horus, and it was very important in Greek mythology and was used to decorate tombs and houses of the Egyptian gods. So it was nothing, as far as I am aware, it had nothing to do with medicine per se. Although the Egyptians were the forerunners of medicine that the Greeks adopted. You see, the Egyptian civilization was far older, 3,500 years before Christ. So their medical practices, while not, some of them not scientific, were adopted by the Greeks because there was an ongoing roaring trade between the ancient Egyptians and the Cretan civilization, as well as the civilization in Peloponnese, as well as with Babylon.
So many questions are coming in. Living in modern Sri Lanka, have you been accused?
Not pedophilia, I hope.
Have you been accused of being too illicit in your taste towards art and history?
Well, nobody has accused me of being of such a thing, but I do admire art, both classical as well as Eastern. and I owe it to my parents, particularly my father, who believed that the classical education was essential for any man. Nobody has done so, but then I discuss art and all that with my wife and my friends, and they have no problems with that. So no patient has accused me of, I don't go and show these prior possessed images to my patients. And my specialty is strictly confined above the diaphragm and below the neck. If I were probably a gynecologist, maybe patients might have accused me of that.
Thank you very much. In the absence of further questions, I would like to thank again Dr. Amarasena for this excellent talk and keeping us entertained over the last 1.5 hours. And so I would like to thank everyone who joined us today, physically as well as virtually. And we would welcome you to join us again on the 2nd of March, which is going to be another interesting lecture under the theme of Pearls of Wisdom. It's going to be, the talk is by Professor Saman Gunathilaka. So it's going to be on scientific fraud, predatory journals and fake papers. So we would welcome you all to join us on 2nd March from 9 p.m. onwards. So thank you very much and good night.